Where Sean Levine will step into the cage with Brendan Tobin in Are You Gonna Fight Me?
I'm gonna fight your ass.
Here on Tapped Out.
That's right, fight me like a man.
Only on the BetQL network.
You know the rules. I want a good, clean fight. When I tell you to break, I want you to step back up my command and break. Now go back to the corner and come out fighting at the bell.
Welcome back into the BetQL network with my opponent / co-host Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. We're going to fight each other here in just a moment, but I mean, we just had an all-time classic off-air fight between Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon. I don't even know what you guys are talking about, to be honest with you. So what did we have a victor? Who won?
I mean, I won. It was a simple, it was tapped out by Jake. He wanted none after I mentioned that, Pokemon's a gazillion-dollar industry every year. What the hell is Yu-Gi-Oh? Nobody knows.
By the way, are you seeing me frozen on your screen right now?
I did, yes.
Dude, my lazy eye is in good form today. Like that thing.
You look like a chameleon, dude.
I really do. I really do. And I don't even take offense to that because I actually do look like a chameleon. All right. For those words, you got to fight me. That's how the segment goes. I make a statement and Brendan's usually wrong. Let's start here. Colby and Bilal in the works. Looks like we might end up actually seeing that fight. I can guarantee you that at some point Colby Covington fights for a belt again.
I'm not going to fight you on that. I feel like Colby's definitely good enough to go fight for a belt again, especially if Kamaru Usman isn't the champion, which he's not right now. If he doesn't get his belt back, I think Colby's got a very good argument to be back there, to be back in a championship. I think the idea that that when Usman was reigning and he had 2 wins over him, it was a tough sell. It's much like Curtis Blades is dealing with in the heavyweight division. No Francis Ngannou anymore. New life for him. He's right back in there as a top contender. It's just one of those tough positions that you're in when you have multiple losses to the man who has gold, but that's not a problem for Colby currently, and it might not be after the rematch. We'll see.
It looks like Joanna Jędrzejczyk has re-entered the USADA pool. Looks like at some point she's going to get back into the octagon. Would you fight me if I said in the hierarchy of women's mixed martial arts, I have her ahead of Rose? I know that Rose beat her a couple of times, but I just think of Joanna Jędrzejczyk before I think of Rose.
Yeah, she's like the Ronda Rousey of the small fighters. I can understand why you're there, but I don't think you can argue that her resume is going to be better than Rose's. Like Rose beat her soundly. So I mean, for me, I go Thug Rose, but I understand where you're coming from there because of just, she kind of opened up the door. She was the first, kind of little woman star there after Ronda opened the door completely for women.
Little Women is an underrated book, by the way. I read that in 7th grade.
No, you didn't. I don't believe you. I don't believe you read Little Women.
All right. Well, if I get called out and I'm lying, then I just admit to it and I'm lying. So I was supposed to read
no
it.
way. I mean, like, dude, it's Cliff Notes. Like, what did
terrible.
You do?
I would never read that book. So yeah, I apologize. Maybe it's the greatest thing ever, but I wouldn't do that. Let's see. John Jones. Obviously, we know that John Jones is coming back. Are you going to fight me if I say there's no way that fight versus Cyril Gane goes the distance? And before you tell me that a lot of fights go the distance with John and that Cyril with the distance with Francis Ngannou, I just think both these guys know how big this fight is, where they're coming in to finish the other guy. And I think John has more ways to finish Cyril than the other way around. But I also don't think that you put enough stock into the fact that John's been gone for 3 years and he's coming up another weight class and he's fighting a guy in Cyril Gane who, coming off a loss, but he lost to Ngannou, who everybody loses to. So there's no way this one goes the distance. You going to fight me?
Yeah, I'm going to fight you big time. I actually would be surprised if it didn't go the distance. I think that the way both these guys, I just feel like, first of all, it feels like I feel like both these guys are going to almost take 2 rounds just to kind of feel each other out as it is. And, John can be a finisher. He can't be a finisher, but sometimes, it's one of those where he can play with his food a little bit. Sometimes it takes him a little bit to get going. I just feel like it's going to be one of those where there's going to be a lot of figuring things out in this fight. And the idea of it ending, maybe it happens because it's heavyweight, but I feel like these guys are uniquely built in this division for it to go the distance.
I disagree. I don't think John wants it to go that deep because when you put on all that weight and it's your first time and you've got all the adrenaline and all those different things going, you could burn out real quick in those late rounds, fourth and fifth round. And that is the last thing you want to do when you're locked into a cage with Francis Ngannou. So it's funny how different we feel about this. I think somebody gets somebody out of there early. I'm not talking about the first round. I agree. They dance around and feel each other out for a round. But after that, dude, like if you're going to unload your money on a round, and this is the way to make some really good money, by the way. It's hard to hit, but if you can pick the round, that's going to finish in 2 or 3. I feel more confident, BT, that that's going to finish in the second or third round than I do telling you which fighter is going to win.
Yeah, but here's the thing with that. Like, I get your theory with that because you think John's going to put on a lot of muscle, but he's never fought like a power puncher. Like, he's typically very methodical. He breaks guys down. He's going to kick at their knees. He's going to try and slowly break them down. So he's never been a guy that really puts pedal to the metal unless, like, he gets a takedown on somebody and he just feels like
why, though? You're exactly right. But let me tell you why. Because he hasn't been afraid of guys at light heavyweights, one punch knockout power. And you have to be when you move up to heavyweight. So that's buyer beware, man. Like, if that's the way that he's fighting and you're right, and he's going to fight like he always has, he's asking for trouble, bro.
I don't know, man. Like, I just feel like he's got such an ability to make guys uncomfortable in the octagon. Like, we underestimate how smart this guy is in the cage. I think that's one of the greatest qualities that he has. He can adapt to things.
Absolutely.
I get it. The last thing that we have in our memory banks are the Santos fight and the Reyes fight. But I just feel like there's the X factor for me with John is always motivation. That when this guy is motivated and there's something that really means something to him, God, he doesn't look like he can be touched, whether it's DC, whether it's rematches against Gus. I just feel like the guy is an absolute machine when he wants to make a statement. When it's, just contender after contender, I don't think that really gets him up. And I feel like that's why it took a while for him to get here. And now we're here. And he also has the chance to really be the man and have people forget about Francis Ngannou. I think that's going to be important for him too, because he doesn't want almost a Daniel Cormier-like situation where people are saying you're not the real champ. He wants to come out and show that, like, he's been building for this for a while. I don't necessarily think that means he has to go finish. I think he's still going to fight like John Jones. And usually if you fight like John Jones, like, you take your time to break down your opponents and usually break their will, but it doesn't necessarily mean it ends in a finish.
There's such a great argument really for both sides. Like, if you want to argue what you are with John, where you just say he's the greatest of all time and the time off, he's had time off before and he's come back and he's been awesome. And he wasn't motivated against Dominic Reyes and those dudes at the end of his light heavyweight run. That's all a great argument. The counter argument is, but dude, he hasn't ever fought at this weight class. He didn't look great the last time out. He has been off for 3 years and nobody gets better not doing their job. So it's just, man, you can make so many arguments, which is why I'm so curious to see what the line ends up. Right now, you got Cyril Gane as a slight underdog. You have to pay the John Jones tax the same way you got to pay for Notre Dame football or Kentucky basketball. You got to pay a little bit. Let's just call it what it is. This is a pick'em fight. It's not going to go off as a pick'em, but this is the ultimate. You can make arguments for either side, and you really can't be wrong.
It has a lot of great mystery to it and a lot of great angles. It's going to be a fascinating fight up until they close the cage door. I can't wait to see it. And I think it's going to be one of those that we might watch the first 30 seconds and be like, oh man, I was way wrong on that, or nailed it. I think that I get the people who are skeptics. You're right. Normally you don't do well when you're not doing this. I do. One of the things that I always go back to and having faith in him is because he's just got such a unique qualification and being out and having life be disrupted and still come back and do awesome stuff. If this was anybody else, I would be on everybody's side on that. This is the one guy I will give a pass to because he's the best I've ever seen do it. I've seen him be away from the sport. The only other mystery is, hey, he's going up in weight class, but we've kind of always wanted to see him at this weight class. And Cyril Gane's a big heavyweight, but he's not like this hulking, intimidating heavyweight where, like, I feel like he's going to ragdoll John Jones. I just saw him get ragdolled by a guy who can't wrestle. So I feel like in a lot of ways, this is the perfect step up for him. and then we'll see. We'll see how long this reign goes for him if he gets the
Are you
win.
more excited for John versus Gon? That just sounds cool. Or are you more excited for Volkanovski and his fight versus Islam?
Oh, John versus Gon. Like I don't get me wrong. I like Islam versus Volk, and it's cool. Like it's number 1 versus number 2. But these are these are two guys that just got their flowers. Like you're talking about a guy who he's like
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true with Volkanovski. He's been around way longer than you're talking about.
He's been around, dude. But how much
defended that?
Fair enough, but how much disrespect was he getting because people said, "Oh, you lost those Max fights. You didn't even beat Max, or you only beat Max in one of those fights." People thought him and Max were this close up until he just whooped Max. So I feel like he's just on the cusp of him really getting his just due. Maybe it's unfair. That's just how I feel. And then Islam just won the title, so it's great. Don't get me wrong; it's a great fight. But if you're asking me which one I'm more excited for, I've been waiting for John Jones' heavyweight debut for years. I think it's one of the great mysteries in the sport we've been wanting and been waiting for a while. So yeah, by far it's John versus Gon.
And it's all about John, apparently. You just answered it. I mean, because Gon is basically the same thing that you said about those other guys. He's kind of the new guy to the party, if you will.
It could be, it could be John versus Blades. It could have been John versus Stipe. Any of the top guys, and I would have been more excited because John's
Blades doesn't whet my palate all that much, even though he's an absolute beast. But if it was Stipe, obviously it would. This just looks good on a poster, right? Like John staring down Cyril Gane. Just these dudes, it looks cool. You mentioned Ngannou. You're gonna fight me. So first of all, the newest news on that, and this came out literally a few hours ago, is that Ngannou's team is apparently in talks with Tyson Fury's team to try to figure out this super fight thing. That's how these things start, obviously. So we'll see if it ends up happening. Are you going to fight me if I say, once that does happen and the odds come out, Ngannou plus 1,500? What I'm telling you is Francis Ngannou has absolutely no chance of winning that fight, and I can't imagine anyone would put their money on him.
No, I'm not going to fight you on that. That's why I feel like it's a bad fight to make. I feel like they're going to be very surprised on how poorly that does at pay-per-view. I really feel like if Francis was smart about this and he wanted to make a boxing match, the fight that he should go get is Deontay Wilder, because even though Deontay Wilder would still be a favorite and is, as big as he is, if not bigger, I think he's 6'6". I still feel like people disrespect Deontay Wilder's boxing ability, and you're talking about best power puncher in boxing, best power puncher in the UFC. You just have what you're saying plus 1,500, I feel like it would be something more palatable, like plus 700 for Deontay Wilder, because you're going to feel like you're going to be watching just a slugfest between both of them.
Do you think Francis Ngannou could beat Deontay Wilder in a boxing match?
I don't, but at least you could tell me, if you told me there was a chance, at least like if some kind of exchange, I would say, okay, I could see it. I don't see it with Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury is way bigger than him. He's a way better boxer than him. He's too smart of a fighter. Deontay, at least I feel like if Deontay is going to go in there, it's not like Deontay's not a smart fighter, but I know Deontay is going to go in there trying to hit that right hand, just like Francis Ngannou would be. So for me, I really feel like that's a more interesting fight. I feel like it does better business. The only reason I feel like people think it does good business for Tyson Fury is maybe the British crowd, I guess. But I don't feel like the boxing fan is going to buy into this. I think they're going to think it's a sideshow. If you told it was Deontay versus Francis, I feel like people would get really into that. I feel like we could talk each other into, hey, but what if? Like that was always the argument with Floyd versus Conor. Maybe it was stupid, but you'd be like, what if Conor lands that sweet left hand on him? And one moment, at least there wasn't this grand size. That's the thing people are missing with Francis versus Tyson. Tyson is way bigger than Francis. Francis looks bigger than everybody in an octagon. You're going to be shocked how much smaller he is than Tyson Fury.
Is it like standing next to an NBA player? Because the first time I did that, when I stood next to Eddie Curry the first time, I almost passed out. Like, it's just unbelievable how big these human beings are. Although, I think that's why people are watching. Obviously, Conor and Mayweather had the appeal because of who they were, and Ngannou doesn't have that type of name value. Maybe you could say worldwide Tyson Fury does, and at one point Deontay Wilder did. but it's just the sheer size of those guys, right? This is Godzilla versus King Kong. So I think that everybody would be fighting no matter who ends up getting it. It's a golden ticket. And apparently, at least from Ngannou's perspective, it's the way to make the most money the quickest, because he saw he didn't get good offers. Maybe he didn't get the offers that he was looking for financially, but he had enough to set up Ngannou's for generations. And instead, he chose to basically be a free agent and see what happens. So we'll see what happens anyway. That's You Gonna Fight Me. Coming up next, we'll get back into a fight that I absolutely hate. I cannot believe that for Conor McGregor's comeback fight, they gave him, well, if you don't know, I'll tell you coming up next. You're locked into the BetQL Network.